你等一下。Okay, we're gonna go live now. Okay, perfect. So we are officially live now on Facebook. And yeah, so welcome everybody. My name is Traei, and I am the founder and author of a global book project called Her Stories Untold. Essentially, this is a project sharing different empowering, inspiring stories of women and all groups of people around the globe from all walks of life. Now, the reason that I started this project and why it was created was because I realized there are so many people out there that have stories to share, journeys that have been taken, but not realizing their significance and importance. My project is open to all women, all groups of transgender women in the globe. And I also talk to very special guests from different backgrounds because they have interesting journeys to share. Now, if you have a story of your journey of how you came to be whom you are today, please do check out www.herstoriesuntold.com. Again, the purpose of this global book project is to empower, uplift, and inspire everybody, okay? Now, before we begin our talk today, I want to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam Nation and lies within the shared traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Katsiap, Musqueam, Squamish, Kikit, and Stolo First Nations. And I want to thank everybody, all our audiences here for joining us here today. It is, very importantly, the month of May, which is known as Asian Heritage Month. So we're here to also celebrate that. And to honor that, we do have a very, very special guest here. And this is Johnny Wu, by the way. So welcome, Johnny. Thank you for being here. So just, to share Johnny's amazing bio. So Johnny Wu is a bilingual Taiwanese Canadian, multifaceted, very, very talented artist with a double major in theater performance and criminology from Simon Fraser University. So his work, Unvarnished and Audacious, delves into humanity through storytelling with a focus on social consciousness, referencing East Asian aesthetics and Taiwanese nostalgia and queer culture. So Johnny's notable theater credits include performances at the Queer Arts Festival, Summer Works Performance Festival, the Public Theater in New York. And he has also developed the multilingual theater project, is it Hymn of the Weaverbirds, with Jocelyn Yucha Chang, supported by the Canada Council for the Arts and Taiwan's National Culture and Arts Foundation. In film, he appeared as Xing Xing in Joyride and wrote and starred in the award-winning I Do short film that was released in 2024. So cultures collide, stories unite. We're going to kind of go into Johnny's creative world today. So so 欢迎大家来到这边，这个是 Johnny Wu。我们今天的主题是讨论一些文化的碰撞、故事的交融，然后稍微走进 Johnny 的创意世界，听他分享一下他的个人的经验啊，还有他的成长的过程，然后一起探索这个 queer arts film community。as well，我们其实是不仅是一场对话，它是其实一个是exploring yourself，通过 arts 来声讨身份，了解艺术中的文化细节。So it's a lot. So welcome, Johnny.
Yeah, 大家好，大家好. Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny Wu. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So it's it's awesome. So so Johnny, this you just got back from Taiwan, right?
Hmm.
How are the arts and local themes going on, and how are things in Taiwan?
Things in Taiwan, I was there in a very exciting and beautiful time. So I was there up until mid-May. 然后我在回来的前几天，美国有一个实境秀叫RuPaul's Drag Race，就
哦
是保罗的变装皇后比赛。然后
，yeah，
它是一个现在在北美非常有名的变装皇后的一个竞赛。那现在他们播出了好几季，今年刚结束了第16季，然后第16季的赢家是我们第一次的一个东亚的赢家，然后他也是一个台湾人，叫
哦
林菲亚峰。那他赢的时候，我觉得台湾的那整个气氛就突然活跃了起来。那我觉得那个活跃不是说哦，只是一个人赢了，所以大家很开心，而是说，我觉得尼菲亚他把台湾的文化带到了一个国际的舞台，然后他在这个过程中让台湾人自己也觉醒，说，哎，其实你看台湾的文化有很多很厉害、很美、很值得外国人去欣赏、去支持的地方。那我觉得他做的这个事情，就是等于是把这个东西震动了出来。所以我在回来之前就觉得很感动，所以我就是很庆幸我那时候刚好在台湾见证了这个事情。嗯。
哦，wow，that's amazing。所以谢谢你的分享。我觉得其实台湾在台北，overall，我觉得那边就是非常的开放的，they really embrace in terms of all types of arts, all types of identity。所以我很高兴你分享这个告诉我们。然后I guess it kind of leads me into wanting to ask you about exploring identity through film, right? Because Taiwan is very diverse and cultural, right? In ways, right? So, um, 你知道就是 in what ways has your Taiwanese Canadian identity influenced your approach to your work, for example？因为你常常在这边，然后也会去台湾，然后又去纽约，到处去，所以，yeah，会不会分享一下？谢谢。
我觉得在创作的过程，因为我是在加拿大长大的，然后所以其实我学习的体系都是加拿大的技巧啊，或是外国人的技巧，然后甚至连语言都是用英文去学习创作这个东西。那在成长的过程的时候，其实有一段时间，我们常听到比方很多我们讲 BIPOC，就是黑人、原住民，然后还有有色人种这些族群，我们常会提到说，哦，we're all the same，我们都一样，我们都一样。然后有一段时间，身为就是酷儿族群也是，大家都说，哦，我们都一样，我们都一样。那
嗯
在成长过程的时候，因为我们一直在宣导我们都一样这件事情，所以你会很努力去找自己跟别人一样的地方。可是我发现在这个过程当中，我自己好像误解了所谓的我们都一样的这件事情，所
嗯
以我会很尽量的去把自己的不一样往旁边放，或者是把自己的特色尽量去淡化，让我自己跟人家都一样，都一样。那甚至说我年轻一点的时候，我常会跟他讲说我是 Asian，我不敢讲，我就说哦，我是 Asian Canadian，或者是我是 Asian artist。然后在这途中，我会发现说，哎，为什么一样就是好的？为什么我要这么追求跟大家一样？然后我现在会常讲，我年轻的时候会觉得 I am great despite I am Asian，就是我的身份对于我跟你的差距
嗯
它不是一个阻挡，它不是一个阻碍，它不是一个 barrier。其实我希望你用没有身份的眼镜，或者是没有身份的角度去看我。我
嗯
后来长大之后，我发现我错了，然后我后来发现，其实我就是不一样，可是这个不一样才是让我有特色，才是让我能办法创作的一个动力。所以我现在不会讲说 I'm just like you, despite I'm Asian，我会说 I'm not like you and I am Asian, but because of that, I have something to offer. I have something that is different from you, but I have something that will fill your blind spots. I have something that will create something that you haven't seen, and you have something that create that I haven't seen. And together we show the audience something that they haven't seen. 就是我觉得每个人的特色，它不是一个阻碍，而是我们的动力，而是我们的，我讲说 super power。然后变成说，其实我现在在介绍自己的时候，我也很想要说我是个 Asian Canadian，我会说我是 Taiwanese Canadian，因为我发现我是台湾人这件事情，对于我的创作，对于我的灵感，对于我创作的手法模式跟故事，其实都有影响。因为我觉得 Asians 这个群体它很大，里面有韩国人、有日本人、有台湾人、可能有新加坡人、有香港人。其实我们每个人的生长文化背景都会影响我们创作的题材，也会影响我们创作的过程跟手法。那我觉得我今天能办法做出我所做出的作品，就是因为我是台湾人。然后我觉得台湾的文化、台湾的语言，不管是说台语，还是说像是台湾的美食，其实这些东西都对我的创作方式，还有我创作的方向是很有影响的。所以我会希望说，我在创作的过程当中，我也可以去 honor 我的这些 roots，我可以去饮水思源，我可以去想到说，我能生长到这里不是凭空出现的，而是我是台湾这个地方滋长出来的一个艺术家，这样子。
哇，
嗯
谢谢你的分享，我觉得你讲的非常的棒，非常的漂亮。You captured it so well. What I'm hearing is that it's very important that we embrace our identity, no matter where you're from, and kind of honor where you are fundamentally, cherish that, grow it, learn about your own culture and your identity, and then share that with others, right? To say that, of course, we're all different. Nobody can be the same. No one is exactly the same in this whole entire globe. And then how we can enrich each other by supporting our differences, right? I think that's really beautiful. Um, 你刚才讨论到这个 identity，right？我觉得有一个重点的话题就是，就是我们来聊一下那个 pronoun 好了，就对了，因为我觉得这是一个很重要的话题。So I was just saying that it's actually quite important that to discuss about pronouns because that's a huge identity theme for a lot of different groups, of course, right? Oftentimes people can have different perceptions about pronouns. I mean, it's not new that these identities, it's more so to speak that we didn't use it as a reference in the past, but we use it now. So, 你是否可以就是分享一下 like what your thoughts are in terms of pronoun? What's the importance of utilizing pronouns and what it could mean to people?
嗯，
Yeah.
谢谢你。我刚才也忘了提醒我的 pronoun 是 he, him, his。对，
Okay.
然后我先说为什么我会就是或者是很多人会开头之前会先讲 pronouns 这件事情。我觉得是因为我们对于 pronouns 的见解，整体社会对于 pronouns 的见解还是有太多的不正确的看法，就是很多 misinformation 或是 misunderstanding。所以造就说，很多人他们想要去跟大家分享他们 pronoun 的时候，其实他不是这么的comfortable，他也不觉得它是一个很安全的事情。所以我们通常会在一个空间里面会先介绍自己的 pronoun，是等于是 invite 其他人也可以去这么大方的分享他们的 pronouns。可能对我来讲，我的 pronouns 很明显，因为我的 gender 跟我的长相，它是在别人眼里是比较清晰的，可是不是每个人都这么清晰。所以我觉得这个行为，它是一个打开空间的方式。那我觉得刚刚讲到 pronoun 的时候，我为什么会讲到很多有 misunderstanding 跟 misinformation，是我觉得大家对我来讲啦，我自己会觉得大家把这个东西复杂化了。那我所谓的复杂化，就是其实它就是一个身份的表达的方式，就像是我的名字，我的名字是 Johnny。那其实 Johnny 在英文里面，很多人是用小名，就是很多人的名字其实本名不是 Johnny，他是其他名字的小名缩写。所以其实，在很多时候，我以前会跟大家介绍说，哦，我是 Johnny，人家都会写 John，或者是甚至我之前有一次收到经纪公司给我的支票，然后那时候上面写 Jonathan，可是这就不是我。 我不会因为觉得哦，你叫我 Jonathan，你就是在欺负我什么什么，可是这不是我，所以我就跟我的经纪公司讲说，哦，其实我的名字是 Johnny，这才是我的名字。那对我来讲，我觉得这个就是对于一个人的身份的尊重，跟一个人身份的 acknowledgement。所以相同的，当有人跟我讲说，哦，我的 pronoun 是 he，或者是我的 pronoun 是 she，或者是我 pronoun 是 they 的时候，他只是在跟我讲说，这个是我，我是用这个方式来让你认识我，所以我也会用这个方式去跟你互动。我不会说，就像是如果跟你讲说我是 Johnny，如果人家硬叫我 John，一直叫我 John，嗯，可是这就不是我啊，所以你现在不是在跟我讲话，因为这就不是我的身份。所以我觉得大家会对于 pronouns 会觉得哦，很多很复杂、很复杂的东西。可是其实我觉得我们就是把它简化到最核心的重点，就是它就是一个人在表达自己身份的一个语言，就像是名字。那另外一点就是很多人会讲说，哦，可是你以前是 he，你怎么现在是 she？那我记不了，我记不了。他们可能是可以接受你这个身份的发掘，可是他们可能对你这个身份发掘之后，他们要变化语言这件事情，他们会觉得哦，我改变不了，我改变不了。可是我觉得这并不是事实，因为其实我们对于一个人的身份的改变是非常习惯的。比方说，我大嫂在跟我大哥结婚之前，她姓李，那大家就会叫李小姐、李小姐、李小姐。可是她结婚之后，她就姓吴，她说哦吴小姐、吴小姐。可是大家对于这个姓氏的转化很自然啊，我们知道说哦你结婚了，所以你现在是李小姐，你现在是吴小姐，这个东西大家不会觉得哦很奇怪很奇怪，或者是哦很困难很困难，是因为我们是真的去尊重跟接受他对于他的身份的转化，然后他的名称的转化。那相同的，如果今天有人发掘了他自己内心存在的身份，其实不是原本的身份，所以他进而改变了他的 pronouns。
Right.
那我接受他的新的身份，我也接受了，应该说不是新身，而是他新发掘的身份。那我为什么会觉得说我用新的方式去称呼他会有困难呢？我并不会这么觉得。那当然，我还是有些人还是会不小心叫我大嫂哦，李小姐，李小姐。那他只是会可能很简单的就是说哦，就是姓氏是吴，或是哦吴小姐，或者是像比方说有人叫我 John，我说哦，其实我的全名我的本名是 Johnny 这样子。那我觉得这个东西它是一个很简单的，可是我觉得出发点是大家要用一个很有共情，然后很接受的方式去互相相处的话，我觉得它就没有这么多的问题。所以我会觉得说，如果我们要讲到身份，我们一直今天目前讨论到现在就是一个身份的发掘跟身份认同，我觉得我们大家需要做的就是尊重跟共情。因为我觉得身份对每个人来说都非常重要。
你讲的非常的棒，因为我刚才在听你讲的时候，我就一直想到这个 respect. So fundamentally, we've been discussing about pronouns and what its significance means. And I think fundamentally, the key point, key takeaway point is being respectful. No matter what each other's identities are, and being respectful continuously, so to speak, if somebody does transition and change their identity, right? That's totally okay, right? And be mindful to that and embracing it and learning about each other as we were continuing with the theme, right? Johnny mentioned a really good point, which I thought it was very refreshing, but so true. A pronoun is similar to it's like a name, you take on. For example, before marriage, you have your own surname. After you get married, you take on a new name. So you're Mrs. Smith now, instead of Miss Jones or something before, right? So it's kind of, I mean, they're not exactly the same thing, but that's kind of what it is. If we allow our minds to be flexible and thinking that way, then the pronoun itself does not cause any further complications or complexity that's not really necessary, right? So that's great. And I want to talk about something really interesting because I think there's the Chinese character about them, it, right? And I think it's interesting to share here because most people do not realize this, of course, right? Unless you study Chinese, deeply. But the Chinese character, it is actually a way of trying to accommodate the West, in terms of referencing she and he. So 我不知道在这里, if Johnny wants to, expand a little bit on that. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Just to clarify，我就是在中文里面，我们第三人称都是他，对不对？都是他，所以在口语上，我们在讲第三人称的时候，其实它本身就是一个 gender neutral term，它就是一个无性别的第三人称。So I was just explaining that in Mandarin, when we refer to someone in third person, we say 他。It's currently written differently, but verbally it's gender neutral. 那为什么会这样？是因为其实在早期的中华文化里面，我们说我们用第三人称的他的时候，都是人字部的一个他。所以为什么是人字部的一个他？因为其实在早期第三人称，他就是无性别的，女生她也是他，男生他也是他。那就是可能是非二次元，就是只要是人，我们都是用他。所以为什么原本的他是人之部，就是因为这样。那后期因为很多西方的传教士来到了当时的那个中国，然后他需要去，然后那时候的中国人需要去帮忙翻译他们的一些文献啊，或者是翻译一些诗经啊，或者是他们一些就是西方的文学，所以他才会开始想说，哎，可是这个文学里面有一个 he 跟 she，那 he 的话，我们就是用他，男性的他。去翻，就是我们常用的那个他去代表男性的他，就是人字部的他。那女生 she 我们要怎么办？she 那所以他们就是找了一个也是就是中华文字，比我们比较不常用的中华文字，然后来替代这个 she，然后创造了一个算是女性。就是女部首的她来代表女性，所以其实第三人称的这一个性别化，它是从西方文化传过来的。所以为什么我们现代会常讲？因为西方我们有 he, she, they 嘛，they 其实它也是一个，它可以是复数，还可以是单数。那现在大家就讲说，那中文怎么办？中文我们也要找一个让就是非二元性别人比较舒服的一个第三人称。可是其实我想要表达的是，我们不需要一直去跟循西方文化的进展，而是其实我们有时候可以回溯一下，我们可以看一下，其实东方的智慧跟东方的文学里面，我们已经有这个东西了。我们对人的接受跟包容，它原本就是存在我们的文化里面。那我们为什么与其跟着西方文化一直创造新的东西，我们为什么不往后看？我们去看，哎，其实，在西方文化的渲染之前，我们已经有这个所谓的无性别的第三人称。那我觉得这个 pronouns 的这个学习过程，它也激发了我自己的创作过程。就是说，好像很多时候我们都要追寻西方的文化，比方说好莱坞的创作方式啊，或是百老汇的创作手法，或者是欧美的一些艺术家在做什么，在做什么，在做什么。可是其实为什么我们不回来看？我们为什么不回头看一下，说，哎，其实东方文化里面它有很多东西是西方文化在学的东西，像比方说很多西方的艺术家很爱去印度学习瑜伽，
对
或者他们也很喜欢日本人的那种文化的艺术品啊，或者是他的体制啊，或者是他们的细腻感。然后他们也很喜欢，比方说东方的文学，比方说五行，然后太极、二极、四象这样子，可以。所以其实西方人也在学习东方的东西，可是那为什么东方人只会看着西方人的东西，而我们好像慢慢忽略了我们自己本身的文化底蕴？对。
对，你讲的非常的对，因为我感觉就是早期来我们亚洲人移民到加拿大的时候，就是一直想要融入这边的圈子，这边的社会，然后也当然要学习 like English, right? And try to speak it fluently to fit in and stuff like that, right? So 我觉得其实两个国家在West and East in terms of speaking to both groups, like 我们有很多地方可以互相一起分享，互相一起学习的。然后你讲的非常的对，就是the fact that very much of Asia Taiwan has been influenced by the West, but then equally in many perspectives, and it's not just in recent times, of course, that in the West, North American culture, a lot has also been influenced by the Asian culture, right? So Johnny was mentioning, like, for example, like the Westerners often like to study yoga, right? A practice of meditation and Zen. They like to study martial arts, right? That came from Asia and multiple realms of different ways of practice. And so we're very much influenced by each other. And then when things are not colliding and they come together, they create beautiful things, right? Which segue me into asking you the next question, Johnny. Now, combining everything here that we've discussed so far, that you've shared, like, how do you navigate and represent queer themes in your films, and what impact do you hope to achieve with your audience? Yeah. 就是你想要带给观众什么？
Such a big question.
Yeah. Let's go. You got it.
我觉得对我来讲，I think it all comes down to a very simple word, and I will expand on that a little bit. And I think the word I will say is love.
Okay.
Um, I think a lot of the piece that I create centers around that emotion, whether it is the seeking of that emotion, the receiving of that emotion, or the losing of that emotion. 因为我觉得"爱"这个词，它非常的重，可是这个重量，它不代表说是，一个我们接不起的情绪，而是我觉得它的重量是它可以像一个东西，你把一个重量放到一个容器里面，其实它就会让这个东西稳住的道理一样。像比方说你可能有一个纸，它可能乱飞，或者是你有一个水，它可能有一点倾倒，可是当你把重量放进去的时候，你就发现这个杯子是稳住的，这个纸是稳住的。一
嗯
样，那我会觉得说，我觉得当我们接受了爱情，或是接受对爱所谓的爱情，我不是只是指 romantic 那种爱情，而是各种的爱情，是可以沉下来的。会让一个人真的是对于自己在这个世界，或者是在自己生活里面可以沉下来的感觉。那我做很多queer related content 的时候，我觉得我想要找到的就是说，这个族群的人要怎么去找到那个所谓的爱。因为我觉得在这个族群里面，我们对爱是非常的渴望，可是也非常的缺乏。那我觉得这缺乏是因为我觉得社会对queer people 的爱不足，那可能有些家庭对 queer people 的爱也不足，然后可能甚至 queer people 跟 queer people 之间要寻找罗曼蒂克的爱情的时候，我们也找不到，因为没有人教我怎么去爱，没有人教我们怎么去两个就是非异性恋的人要怎么去相爱，课本里面没有，电影里面没有，电视剧里面没有。
嗯
那我们没有罗密欧与朱丽叶去看说，哦，原来爱情是这样。我们也没有梁山伯与祝英台，我们没有这些文学，跟我们没有这些资讯去教我们怎么去爱。那我们怎么去感受到那种就是butterflies in your stomach 的那种感觉？那另外一种就是，我觉得很多女性也会是这样，因为我觉得我后来发现说，我创作的伙伴很多都是女性，就是一样在华人社会里面，很多女性跟家里人的关系，我觉得也蛮就是很值得学习的是他们也在寻找这个爱是什么，就是在一个父权社会底下，我们怎么去接受别人的爱，我们怎么去给予爱，我们就是去寻找爱，是相同的。那一样酷儿的人，我觉得他们很渴望家庭的恋爱，可是在这个家庭恋爱，我发现有时候他们很卑微，有时候他们就是觉得说啊，反正家里人对我这样子就够了，或者是家里人跟我这样子就够了。他们好像跟很多中华传统女性一样，会觉得说啊，反正这样子就够了。可是我觉得爱情不应该是这样，所以我做的很多作品，我想要表达的是说，我觉得爱情不只是这样。我觉得 there's a lot of possibilities to love and in love, and that what I hope to do in my work, especially in my queer work or my Asian work, is to let people know that the possibility of love and to be loved and loving is actually very, very grand. And I want to bring those type of possibilities onto the screen or onto the stage by showing different versions of love and different ways of love. For example, the short film we were talking about, I Do, 愿意，它其实就是在讲说，就是在探讨一个同志的男性跟他的母亲的爱。那我觉得在很多的同志的议题的的创作里面，我们聊到家庭跟同志都是那种，我要么就是爸妈很接受，要么就是爸妈很不能接受。那这两个东西的时候，我就会觉得说，好像现实生活不是这样的。我觉得可能是华人社会，我觉得华人家庭的爱是坐落在这个所谓的灰色地带。那我就是想要去寻找这个灰色地带。那在这一部短片里面，我想探讨的爱是一个存在在心里可是说不出口的爱。那我觉得这种爱是很亚洲社会的，像是我爸妈他们很愿意做很多很多事情，然后去表达他们的爱。可是你要叫他们说出“爱”这个字，其实会台语我们讲很给格，很给格，就是很不舒服。那我觉得很多华人的父母也是这样，可是这个说不出口的东西，它造就了这中间会有很多的误会，就像是两个情侣一样，其实很多人会错过爱情也是这样，是因为一个不敢表白，然后另外一个不敢表白，所以大家就想说，哦，可能都没有意思就散了。那我觉得家庭也会这样，就是一个说不出口的父母跟一个害怕说出口的孩子，这当中它引起的这一个摩擦，其实会造就很多遗憾。所以我会希望是我们怎么去探讨这个，透过探讨这个遗憾的方式，慢慢去把这两个人拉近一点，拉近一点，拉近一点，然后去鼓励大家更勇敢的去追爱。那追爱不只是罗曼蒂克的爱，是勇敢去追，可能是亲子的爱，朋友跟朋友之间的爱，或者是罗曼蒂克的爱。嗯。
Wow, okay, that's such a really beautiful share. And you know, Johnny was just sharing that his focus, his theme is on love, right? Love in multiple aspects of it. He talks deeply into about, you know, our parents, right? And Asian culture and whatnot. And I think that's really important. 因为我觉得其实真的我们很多时候，我觉得不管你是哪一个 identity, you don't know how to love, right? It's like how would you know how to love or which way to love if you didn't see it or learn it or experience, right? And this isn't to fault our parents, but I think it expands from especially I guess Asian cultures, right? Where the expression of love, right, is different in terms of how it's not direct. It's actually in many ways like suppressed, right? So like 比如说比如说爸爸妈妈在亚洲，在我们台湾的 culture 里好了，他如果他很爱你，他不一定会跟你说 "I love you, I love you, you know, I care about you," but that doesn't mean that they don't love you or care about you less just because they don't express it, you know, through verbal expressions, right? That's actually something that I learned to coming to Canada, you know, immigrating here with my family. I didn't speak English and I come here, I was like, why are these people giving hugs, right? Like, why are they so expressive, right? Okay, I should give hugs too, right? How come these people just say I love you freely? Okay. Okay, cool. Right? That type of thing, right? So it's different, but that doesn't mean, you know, by not saying it, you're not feeling it or you love less, right? So I think, you know, I love how that you utilize this theme of love to express and, you know, showcase in all types of work that you do, right? So in essence, just to, you know, summarize it, love is a universal sense. It's profound and it's multifaceted. It's an emotion that transcends through, you know, culturally, geographically, and through temporal boundaries. Like it's often described as a deep affection care and connection towards someone or something, you know. So Johnny mentioned, you know, very well earlier that there's different dimensions of love, right? So the highlight here, I think the key point is universal love. And love in its nature is universal, right? We talked about romantic love, right? Characterized by passion, intimacy, commitment between partners, right? Johnny mentioned a really good point, kind of funny too, because it's so true. People often miss the opportunity of love because they don't know how to express it, right? Or maybe the other person was expressing it quietly in a suppressed way, but that doesn't mean that person loved the other person any less, right? So it causes confusion in that sense, right? But in essence, romantic love is when, you know, both parties having shared experiences, attraction, and having a desire for deep and enduring connection, right? You know, we also talked about familial love, right? The love between family members, the bond between parents and children and siblings. It's very foundational and often unconditional. It, you know, generally speaking, that's the ideal framework, right? Provides a sense of security and belonging and support. You talk about like friendship love, right? So 友谊的挚爱，比如说朋友跟之间的建立的互相的尊重啊、信任啊，或是在共同兴趣上，包括 companionship, you know, loyalty and all that stuff. I'm talking about the love of friendship, right? One thing that's really important is self love. Self love 就是挚爱，OK？这个其实也非常重要的，因为自爱是让我们自己懂得怎么样照顾好、认识我自己的 value. So self-love is about knowing yourself and knowing your value, and you constantly maintain that relationship, right? And this is very important to maintain your mental well-being, and as well, it transcends into your health, right? 然后另外一个就是you know, there's also like altruistic love, the selfless love and concern of the well-being of others, right? So that's often projected in the film works and stuff like that, right? By showing kindness, compassion, empathy towards others or strangers that are in need, right? We talk about spiritual love. You know, like I think many people experience this. That's why they gravitate towards different groups for a spiritual connection, right? Whether it's the nature, higher power, or the universe, you know. But I can, you know, what's connecting that one is about the interconnectedness, right? So, and then I think very importantly, I also want to share that there's platonic love. Now, this is a deep, non-romantic affection between individuals. We can just be as profound and meaningful as romantic love, right? So 这些都是非常重要的，就是人跟人之间的一个爱情。So no, thank you,
But
Johnny.
I also want to mention something
Yeah,
that like what was really important to me in the short film and actually a lot of the works that I do is the showcasing of love. Love is an action. And the reason why I brought that up is I personally don't believe so much in this idea of like selfless, altruistic love, or like this idea of like love is like it's given. It's like when you're born into a family, you have love. I think love is an action. Love is a verb. Love is something we do for each other. Love is something we give to each other. Love is something we earn from each other. And the reason why I mention that is 我觉得 we take the idea of love for granted a lot of the times, whether it's family, whether it's romantic, right? Like a lot of the times between parents and child, right? Like parents assume that the child has to love me because I'm their parent. But it's like, yes, but you have to give action. You have to show you and show doesn't have to be like a big grand thing, but you have to let them know, right? Because I feel like a lot of the times um I see a lot of Asian people that love their parents so much, but they don't know how to connect to that because their parents are, you know, they have this wall up and and but why, right? But we can't just assume love exists. It's a bond that actually has to be created, that has to be nurtured, um that has to really be birthed. to a certain extent. And same thing with romantic love. We see so many times where we get into a pattern with our partners and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we love each other. But then we stop losing the action of showing love. We stop losing the pursuit of love by giving or receiving from each other. And I think that is very important for me in my work, is that love is a verb and not a noun.
Yeah, that's a very important part. And I'm hearing the word maintaining, right? We're constantly, actioning love, showing love, giving love, receiving love, enjoying love, but at the same time, it's a constant cycle of, trying to maintain it, right? You cannot
Yeah.
just expect that, oh, I give you love once, oh, you should love me indefinitely. That's it, right? Like I have to do things, you have to reciprocate and stuff like that, if you're talking about between two things, right? Like, yeah, if I love a plant, right? I can't just say I love my plant, you know. The moment that I stop taking care of it, watering it, maybe changing the soil, adding nutrients to it, my plant's gonna die.
Yeah.
It's not gonna last, right? So that's kind of how it is. Like there's always a reference，就是我们超人就是在讨论一杯水嘛，哈，人家说如果水你不去，you don't do anything with the cup of water, it's gonna evaporate, it'll disappear, right? You have to fill it, right? Some constantly filling your glass, right? So I think that's a very well captured way of explaining the depth and the themes between the layers of different love, and I love that. I did talk about yeah 我这边快速的分享一下，就是我最近published my first book, right? It's called Honest Reflections. Yeah, so I'm actually gonna be at Chapters Indigo on Robson Street in Vancouver, BC on June 16th. Between 12 to 5 p.m. I'll be there signing books, so you can get a copy there. In it, I also have it's about poetry reflections. I did talk about love too, so I love what you said because I can sincerely relate to that. The poetry reflections in here also contain images or pictures. Oh, there's my picture. By the way, this cover. Yeah, it's one of my artwork. But yeah, it contains pictures or images that I've taken over the last like 20 years, and I kind of just put it together so that you can be in your private space and read the reflections and then look at the pictures and think about your life, your identity, what does it all mean, your existence. And feel free to scribble across the pages. But I thought, yeah, that triggered that, just these deep reflections. I love it.
Amazing.
So thank you for sharing. I wanted to, go in a little bit about the cultural nuances is in art. Like, can you share how the cultural difference between Canada and Taiwan, can influence the creative process? Because I know you mentioned Taiwanese nostalgia, right? And what is like the queer culture there? Like yeah, because most of us don't understand that.
I think for me, my recent short film I Do was such a fascinating project to create because it's I'm not, first of all, I'm not a writer, so I don't write a lot of screenplays or plays in general. So I'm still finding my process of writing. But what was so fascinating when I was writing this is the character is Taiwanese, but moved to a foreign country. I wasn't specific, but they spoke English. So when I was first writing this, obviously because the rest of the crew is English speaking, so I wrote a lot of the work in English first, including the dialogue. And then I started trying to translate it back to Mandarin or translate it to Taiwanese to sort of like to add the layers of like, oh, this is a Taiwanese person. So when he's speaking to his family, he's obviously speaking in Mandarin or Taiwanese. And what I found that was really fascinating was there was this very specific line that actually became the title of the film, but we took out the line in the actual script, is he invites his family over for dinner.
Mm.
And in the English, I wrote I do. And that so the response from the other person was I do, to sort of like echo this idea of like in the film it was set on the wedding day of this main character, whose name is Jacob. So Jacob is asking his family, well, like, would you be willing to come over for dinner with my new husband? And the family,
Oh,
yes.
sorry, I think there's some technical fail right now. So can we have a real line? We'll stay on this chat, and then I just need to reconfigure the camera setting. My
Sounds good.
apologies.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
Thank you. Can you, yeah, I think I had a little bit issue with the camera. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I totally didn't mean to interrupt you.
Technical difficulties. It's okay.
Yeah, it always happens.
It's the world of technology.
That's
Um,
right. 不好意思，刚才你讲到，可以继续。
so I was mentioning like
Yeah.
in the story, when Jacob invites his family to come over for dinner with his new husband, the original text was "I do," the response, and something felt really off about it, even though like it makes sense because it relates to the title of the film. But part of it, when I was discussing with my directors, I got two directors to actually direct this film, which was a very lovely process. Kimberly Ho and Cynthia Zhou. When we were having this conversation, it was like it didn't feel culturally authentic to how Asian people would speak to each other.
Mm.
And so at the end, I actually rewrote that line, and instead of saying I do, the family member actually says "三八." But there's something so Taiwanese about it because you're like, this person is like, yes, I will do it, but it's like, oh, you're so silly for like, why would you even ask? And that was a moment where I was like, oh, right, because culturally we speak so differently. So culturally, when I'm creating these pieces, there's nuances that are very, very different in whether it's like how the character speaks or how a script is written. So for example, we were talking about like the cultural difference between the queer community or queer content.
Right.
One of the things is in the West, when I'm creating queer content or queer characters for Western communities or Western culture, it's very big, it's very flamboyant, it's very vibrant, it's very like this like glitz and glamour. Obviously, not everybody acts like that or lives like that, but that's something that fascinates me about like the queer community in North America specifically. And then when I'm creating a lot of queer content for like Eastern culture or for like that are set in the East, there's a lot of there's a lot of um more like layers. And I don't mean layers as in like they both have a lot of depth and layers, but layers as in like the way Taiwanese people talk is what we say and what we mean are slightly different, right? Like I might
Yeah.
say "sanba" meaning silly, but really I mean I do. I accept you. I want to come. I want to do this. Same thing with how I create with when I create with Taiwanese aesthetics, right? It's there's subtlety to that. There's something the colors might be slightly different. The colors might have a little bit more of a softer tone, or what I decide to put on stage might be slightly different. Like instead of flowers, for example, if there's a scene instead of flowers or big uh beautiful things, um maybe it's a light, maybe it's a lantern, maybe it's a hot meal. Like there's different ways to show the character or the story's conflict or expression that
Yeah.
looks slightly different when I create in Canada or when I create in Taiwan. Or for example, when I create in English, there's a lot more text. There's a lot more saying. There's a lot more expression. But when I create in Mandarin or Taiwanese, there's a lot more images. There's a lot more. I'm showing you the face of this person. I'm showing you this this bubble tea that is laid on a nightstand to show that this person came or they care, as opposed to this person saying like, "Oh, I left you something,"
Mhm.
right? So I try to bring in that cultural nuance into that, and also what I put on stage is very different, right? The symbol of queerness in for me in Eastern culture, I like to play a lot with like fruits. I when I was in university, I did a directing class and I directed a play, a adaptation of the Labrador Bluebeard's Castle. And instead of like creating seven doors, I created seven fruits
Oh,
that the character would bite into, and instead of physically walking into these doors or into these rooms, um, the character was going to this hallucination into this like psychological space. Um, and I found that I was really fascinated by that. So I started adding a lot more food into my work. And looking back, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. I'm a Taiwanese person. Our whole like our whole foreign policy or the way that we like introduce Taiwan to people is through food. We talk
yeah.
about like, my shirt right now. It's like 鸡排, right? 鸡排,凤梨酥, bubble tea,
Yeah.
鼎泰丰. Like our whole way of communicating with people is food. And
Yep.
so I realized, oh, that makes so much sense that a lot of my work contains food because I'm a Taiwanese artist. That's how I talk. I think food has so much more language to it that people give credit to, right? And I find that a lot of Asian creators do that as well, right? We see there was that Disney short film called Bao using
Oh, yeah.
like
I
a,
tried.
a bao to like indicate this idea of like nostalgia and love and craving and protection. Um, and same thing, like for myself, like when I see a bubble tea in a film or on stage or something, I immediately connect to it. So, or like when someone see like a steamed bun, they immediately connect to it. So how do I play with that? How do I utilize our strong connection with food to sort of tell these stories without having to express all these like things?
No, that's so very true because that's why sometimes it's not, heavy on the dialogue or, the conversations that gets things expressed or heard. It's
Mhm.
about observing those tiny little moments and all these gaps of silences in between. And I think the reference to food is very central to especially Taiwanese culture. Like food is huge. Everyone, if they've been to Taiwan, though, right away, there's no way they won't mention, oh yeah, the food there is great. Or I ate this. Did you try this or that? Like it's just constantly about the conversation, right? So I know like when I was growing up, for example, my dad was doing business, like you would always feed your clients first, right? Before you talk about anything heavy or go into business talk. Family gatherings, and this extends to all cultures, like whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas time, Chinese New Year, and any sort of event, people gather together. What do? They plan out and they eat. Right? They
Uh,
eat. It's just different types of items. So I love that, triggering the nostalgia, like, for example, what you mentioned, Bao, right? That was great. I cried. It was very emotional. I like Baos. I watched them. I love Baos. I wanted to eat Baos, and I look at Baos differently now, forever, going forward, right? Which is great, right?
because I
And
was gonna, oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
You brought up something that I was so inspired by when I was writing I Do as well, right? Because it was a short film. So it was between 10, it was 10 minutes cap. We have a director's cut that's slightly longer, but it's within that time frame. So there was a scene where I had to show like the deep connection between the mother and the son. And I was like, I have like maybe 3 lines. So
Mm.
how do I show that relation? How do I show that connection? How do I show that love? Um, and then it came down to the mom saying one thing. And is the mom in Taiwanese saying, 假爸 boy, like, are you full yet? And for me, whenever I hear my mom say that, like, it just feels warm. It feels nice. It feels like, but that's how we express love.
Yeah.
Like, we don't say too much and we just ask, are you full? Do you want more food? Are you hungry? Right. And I find that is very Taiwanese. And so, like, in terms of creating with nostalgia and culture, that is a great example for myself. Like, oh, yeah, sometimes it's just in Taiwanese saying 假爸 boy, like that automatically is able to say so much more because we know the context behind um what is being expressed. Maybe some people that don't know Taiwanese culture might not get the context as quickly, but I feel like how we stage that, like I feel like the language of love is still universal. You still understand when a mother asks a child, are you full yet? It isn't just, oh, are you done eating? Right? It's like, are you full yet? Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you cared for? Um, so yeah.
Yeah. No, and you're right, because it's about nurturing the fundamental, right? So and this, what also comes to mind is like music. I think
Mm.
music is so powerful to trigger nostalgia in people. That's why films with certain music were like, wow, I remember listening to that when I was like 4 years old, and I didn't know what my grandpa was listening to, but that music reminded me of that exact moment in history, in time of my
Yeah.
childhood,
Yeah.
right? That's beyond powerful. That's like it's something where words cannot express how powerful that the impact of that nostalgia is, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, if that was a movie scene, like, do you need a lot of lines? No.
There's so many songs that I wanted to put into that short film if it wasn't for copyright. And I was like, oh, the scene would sound so good with like Jiang Hui, or the scene would sound
Oh,
so good with like SHE, because it like it's connects so quickly, right? I remember exactly like where I was and how old I was and what I was doing when I was listening to SHE's CD or Zhang Hui Mei, like and that's why I find that a lot of Taiwanese film do that. Actually, a lot of Taiwanese film use music to set the era. So it's like if it's 2000, the way they show it is they show the music. They
yeah,
play they always have the scene where the main character is walking to school or doing something mundane, and then they play that pop music of that era, and we immediately know what that feels like. We
yeah.
immediately know what time we're set in. Um, Yeah, and I find that not just Taiwanese nostalgia, but also queer culture as well,
Mm.
right? When I say create a lot with queer aesthetic, that's also the thing, right? Like when we see certain symbols, when we see certain scenes, when we see when we hear certain music,
Yeah.
it really connects to um how we feel, right? How do I emulate this sensation of like queer love, right? It's not the same as like heterosexual love in a sense that what we connect when we think about love is so different.
Mm.
So how do I create this idea of like queer love in like a wedding? How do I what are the necessities I needed to bring into this? What are the sort of like the aesthetics that I wanted to bring in. This film specifically, the short film I do, it was a lot simpler because it was a pretty conventional wedding. But as I'm creating my future project and stuff, I'm just thinking about like, for example, what are the what are the things that immediately reminds people of queer relationships? A funny one that people always use is like the notification sound of apps, of social apps. There's like very specific one that people know it right off the top of their head. And that's a funnier one. But like for example, like I really like these like Instagram artists
Yeah.
that I can't remember his handle. I'll definitely find it. But he draws these scenes of gay couples in their everyday life. And it's like them lying in bed and watching Drag Race, or them lying in bed doing these things where like there's just certain things that are so specific to queer relationships that I find so fascinating that that same thing. How do I show that to express your relationship so that I don't have to say it? I don't have to put so much dialogue into explaining how close they are. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very beautiful, you know. I think it's like we've overlearned and received all these noise from like social media, being online, all these loud noises that it's okay to learn to the quietness, you know, of expression, right? Of non-expression is also a form of expression. Look, ah,
It's like a
that's
small
lovely.
part of the poster.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Did you design this?
No, actually,
Yeah,
we had a wonderful photographer to come in to shoot
yeah.
this for us. Pedro did this, and then it was sort of like a conversation between Pedro and myself and my two directors, Kimberly Ho and Cynthia Zhou. And we sort of just like I had a sort of an idea of what I wanted to show, to not give away too much about the short film.
Yeah.
Uh, but also like when someone watches a short film and they come back, they knew exactly why this is set up the way it is. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. Thank you. And I guess the question would be like, is there a way where do we watch your short film?
It is on the way. We wanted to do a director's cut of the short film and then re-release it. Part of it is because it was created as part of a competition, which everybody should apply to. I think they closed applications this year, but definitely look into. It's called MAM, which is
Yeah,
Mighty Asian Movie Making Marathon. It's hosted by VAF, Vancouver Asian Film Festival,
right?
amazing festival that supports a lot of Asian creation and really try to support Asians like across the board, whether it's Southeast Asian, East Asian, South Asian,
All
but
group.
like all groups of Asians. So really look into what the festival has to offer. But because there was a 10-minute limit, one of the things that was lost in that cut was there was a sort of banter between the main character Jacob and his family member, um, and in Taiwanese that I really wanted to keep. Unfortunately, because it doesn't really push the the story ahead. We had to cut that for time. But for me, that was such an important quality because that's what makes this film really Taiwanese for me, is showcasing Taiwanese on the screen, to showcase Taiwanese on the global stage. Um, but also again, like it just builds the character relationship so fast. And I was very, very grateful that I was able to create. There's still Taiwanese in the film, not that all the Taiwanese is cut, but that part really, for me, captures the relationship of these characters so quickly. And also, like, I think it's just so important that having that language in there, because it's undeniably Taiwanese when you show that. It's undeniably Taiwanese when you just show the language and how the language is being used. So we are doing a director's cut. We're adding that back in, and then we're going to submit to festivals. So it's going to be out around the world, hopefully from 2024 to 2025, even to 2026. So I will make sure to keep everyone posted, and hopefully people will get to see this very, very beautiful piece that I was very fortunate enough to create with my friends and people I love and adore. The most of the main cast is all Taiwanese. I was so fortunate to find Emily and Angie to sort of join me on this journey. We're all Taiwanese, so it's a main Taiwanese cast telling a Taiwanese story about Taiwanese culture, but also about queer Taiwanese culture and queer Asian culture. So we're submitting that around the world. So we'll see where that lands.
Okay.
We're excited to share.
Stay tuned, audience. Yeah, because Johnny's gonna be sharing that with us. I did want to talk about, just be mindful of time, but I want to ask you, like, what was a pivotal moment in your career that you felt that, defined your artistic voice? I know I Do was one of those your very special projects. And I did watch it last year at a film festival. It was amazing. Yeah. It was like, wow. Yeah. Everything you said here, check. It's true. Yeah. But everyone should still go watch the film, of course.
I would say there's three pivotal moments. I
Yeah.
don't know which one really solidified that, but I think the first moment was when I was in second year in university, and my teacher pulled me aside,
Mm.
and she and I had a conversation. Her name is Reina, and Reina sat me down, and then she was talking about, like, my voice. She was talking about how when I speak, or sometimes when I go on stage, my voice is very high. I don't speak I speak like this now. My voice sometimes still goes high when I'm in doing small talk, but she reminded me that that was a defense mechanism. It was like I'm pitching my voice so I seem cute and approachable, things like that. But it reads as insincere. It reads as I don't really want to do this, but I'm here to have fun. And she said something to me that I thought was very beautiful. She says, and I can see that through you, because I know that we are people who are meant to do this. We are people who are destined to do this. Not that I was crazy talented or whatever, but that was what my heart really craved to do. And that she encouraged me to really go forth. And, my voice changed, how I use my body changed, because my heart changed. And I think that was one. The other was when I applied to grad school when I first graduated. And I went through this whole journey. I didn't end up getting in, so I was very upset. But in that process, I really have to ask myself, why am I doing this? Because they ask you to do a cover letter. But beyond that, I had to get all these people to write references for me, and they want to see my cover letter. They want to have my interviews with me. They're like, okay, well, and they're all people who love me very, very much. And I felt very supported by them, but they're also very intelligent and smart and prestigious artists that are like, I'm not just gonna write you a reference because I like you. I need to know why I'm writing a reference. And in that process, I was like, oh my God, okay, well, who am I? Why am I an artist? Why am I doing this? What is the purpose? And that process really helped me solidify what I wanted to do. And I'm gonna butcher this quote because I like to paraphrase it a lot, but I was reading this book called Acrobatics of the Heart by Stephen Wong. And in that book, he referenced something that this artist called Georgiev Kotowski um, said to him during their time studying together at NYU. And I sort of took parts of that and I was like, oh, right. That's how I feel. That is me. And to paraphrase that, it's about like my job is to not make political statements, but to make holes in the wall. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if what I'm saying is a fact. I can't claim that. So when I present a piece of work, I'm not there to say, well, this is what it is. This is a statement and you need to follow it. But rather, I want to poke holes in the wall. The wall being what we see, this assumption, this thing that closes us off. I want to sort of drill a hole into it to show people that there is more on the other side, right? There's more to what we perceive. There's more out there for us. What you make of it is up to you. But all I want to do is to say, are there really only two genders? Is this the only way we can love each other? Is this the only way we can walk through the earth? Is like heterosexual love the only way we can love? Is Canadian or North American way of creating art the only way we can create art, et cetera, is to really, for me, create possibility. That's my work. So that became another pivotal moment of like, right, my work as an artist is to create possibility or to showcase possibility, as I like to say. And the last is when I did a workshop in 2017 with Gateway Theater, it was a bilingual workshop aimed to train artists to work bilingual in Mandarin and English. And I met my collaborators and Jocelyn Yujia Chung. And Jocelyn and I got really close to that workshop. And in 2018, I decided I really wanted to create a queer Asian theater piece. I remember being at a workshop and during the discussion, someone said something that really resonated with me. He said that when he walks into the bookstore, he can't find himself. Because when he goes to the Asian section, there's nothing about queer people. When he goes to the queer section, there's nothing about Asian people. So do I choose to be Asian or do I choose to be queer? What if I'm both? Where do I live? Does both even exist? And I was like, oh, that's how I feel in theater sometimes. When I flip through programs and seasoning and I'm looking for a show, if I'm looking for a queer show, I'm seeing a bunch of people that doesn't look like me, where it's telling stories that I fully resonate with. And then on the opposite end, when I see Asian shows, there's no mentioning of queer people at all. But we exist because we're here and he was here. So why aren't those stories exist? If I'm there to create possibility, that is a possibility. So how do I bring that onto stage? So I approached Jocelyn in 2019 and say, I want to create a brand new piece about that uses Taiwanese and queer arts, or Taiwanese and queer culture as the core, and grow that into a theater piece. So we started creating Hymn of the Weaver Birds, which is a story about people finding belonging. It's a story about 5 people who serendipitously find themselves in an abandoned bathhouse. And in that space, they sort of start to, they learn from each other, they grow with each other, and they still to build this nest together. And through that process, they actually start to face their fears, their traumas, and their rejection of femininity. Or I like to explain it in Mandarin more because that's what we're trying to capture is they're trying to reconnect with their 阴性能量. And for me, why I like to say in Mandarin is because in Chinese culture or Chinese philosophy, we see people as having yin and yang. So the masculine or the feminine. But because in English we say masculine and feminine, we have segregated those things. So I find a lot of the times we walk as half a person when really we should come together. So by eliminating the idea like this gender, like this sort of this gendered language. Eastern philosophy is actually teaching people that we have to receive our masculine and our feminine because that's what makes people. And that expands to the greater culture. So we started creating a piece based on that. And then Hymn of the Weaver Birds was very fortunate. We have a lot of artists that join us for this creation. They come, they leave. Some people stay with us for longer. And it's a lot of, I used to say it's a full queer Asian cast, but we had a very lovely artist that joined us who identifies as being straight. So I can no longer say that, but I love him. But we have a diverse Asian cast, people who all connected to this idea of belonging, and they're all Asian male. But how does a bunch of Asian males find their femininity, which I find so fascinating, and it's a very important angle because we think femininity is always a women issue. It's always about females. But actually that's not fully true. And actually find that for a masculine body to find a feminine energy and put that together, I think that is what the Eastern philosophy of Taiji is really about.
Yin
So I
and
think,
yang, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that was a third pivotal moment is really stepping up and being like, oh, I am an artist. And as an artist, I have my own voice. I have my own creation. I have my own exploration. I'm not just a performer. I love performing. I love acting. But I have more. I have my own thoughts to say. I have my own things to create. And to be brave enough to create was a big pivotal moment as well. So I would say like three. One is like why I became an artist. One is like, so the earliest is like, I am an artist. The second stage is why I became an artist. And then the third one for me is like how to be an artist. So yeah.
No, we have definitely a lot of things that we can learn from Johnny about these aspects of that, really knowing yourself, your identity, and then sticking with it, and then reaching for it and expressing it, right? So I feel like in summation, like you talk, really the whole envelope of these the queer representation, right? So how you go about navigating the advancement of that, right? Projecting unity, a community, a sense of belonging, right? And I think that's very well captured because that sense of belonging, and this isn't to compete to say which one's more important. They're different things, but they're very similar. That sense of belonging is also about um newcomers coming to a new country, right? Building a new community. I loved your reference about, he going to the bookstore and all he could find was one section for, Asian culture, the other section for queer, but then where do I belong, right? So I think the sense of belonging, the communities, whether it's referencing BIPOC, for example, right? The diversity representation, we often don't fit under a checkbox. And that's the real truth of it, right? There is one for Blacks, there's one for Indigenous, respectfully for all groups, and then there's one for people of colors. That means everybody else that is uncategorized falls into POC, people of color, right? Kind of thing. So that, I think the bookstore really paints a clear image, what visually that would look like. Like you would go into the section for Blacks, there's a section for Indigenous, and then everybody else's sections is in the people of color, right? And then now if you want to talk about different pronouns and identity, that kind of goes into it, right? Then you break it out even deeper, like, okay, well, which culture are you from, right? What race are you? Like, what languages do you speak, right? What is that culture, right? And then you're like, oh, well, oh, okay, this little section right here, right? But then I'm also there, all over the place, right? Kind of thing. So yeah, so that advancement that I'm seeing here is kind of, it's really based on unity. Yeah.
I think one of the things that people often misunderstand is when we break identity down to so nuanced and so detailed, a lot of people say like, oh, we're segregating each other. We're like, oh, we're creating more differences and things like that. But what I would argue is we are creating more differences. But how do we create unity is to understand that we are all different, therefore we are all the same. Because if we're all different, then no one is different. It's just knowing that there are a lot of different small pieces that in the world, and actually we can come together, because when there's no norm, if we don't think this person is the normal and everybody has to fit into this category, we're actually all different, then that thing actually becomes equal. When we're all equally different, we're all equal. And I think that is the most important, is to not try to think that, oh, we need to all be the same and trying to force into something. Then when we are actually more accepting of people being a little different from us and actually understand that that is the normal, then we can actually have this idea of being unified, but also still distinct.
That's beautiful, because it just hits home with how we can all work together better, right? And
Mhm.
you can even send it off and apply it everywhere else in your life, right? I think that's beautiful. Then we would achieve more harmony and balance, in terms of all aspects, all realms of our lives, globally speaking.
Even the word harmony is so beautiful. People like to say harmony, harmony, but when people express harmony, they think of this thing of like the same sound. Harmony is not the same sound. Harmony is multiple different sounds, but working together, right? When it's the same sound, that's a melody. That's the same tune going collectively together. I'm might be completely wrong in terms of what I'm referencing melody. I'm sorry for the musicians out there, but at least I understand harmony is there's different parts, but the different parts work together. That's harmony. Harmony is differences working together.
Yeah, you're speaking my dictionary, so that's great, because I totally believe that, like, and just going back a little bit, addressing the differences, no problem. Learning about them, no problem. And then having the tools and thinking of ways of how we can work together, right? This all goes into alignment with harmony, straight up.
Mhm.
I think that's what it's about. I think just being mindful of time. I also maybe quickly just kind of have a baby glimpse into the Taiwanese queer art community. Like, what's it like? Like, do you see any challenges and stuff like that? I know we talked about working well together, so we covered that aspect of it. But like, is there a difference that you can maybe share a little bit about working in Taiwan and then working here?
I will say one of the things that I am finding trouble with when I see queer work in Taiwan specifically is that there is this like obsession over like the flamboyant, fun, glitzy glamour, like in Mandarin with a yao yan.
Hmm.
Like these, like if you watch any um and obviously there's probably a lot of indie stuff that I haven't seen, but whenever there's a bigger production that is queer, that is set in Taiwan, it's always these people in very like provocative clothing, heavy makeup, and it's like very 一定要很妖艳，一定要很炫，然后 but and I see that I've experienced that in the queer culture, but that's not all of us.
Hmm.
Where is the quiet? Where is the nuance? Where is um so like there's some films that I really like, for example, like 亲爱的房客, 还有是谁先爱上他. Like these two films are about queer people. But what I love is these two queer characters aren't the ones that are in like the hot short shorts or like the leather gear, right? Because that we have those stories will continue to exist, and I love that. But 在狂欢之后的安静, where is that? Where is those stories? And I wish that we would dig deeper into that. I think I want us to really fight to explore us as queer people in relations to each other rather than just the queer aesthetic and the queer culture. Um,
Yeah.
and I hope I really think we'll see a lot more of that. There's a lot of amazing people that are creating that kind of work and even go deeper, right? I would even say then go the opposite end of the spectrum, which I love about queer arts in Europe, is they go into the kink, the grits, the underground clubs, the nasty, the grotesque, the dirty, right? 我觉得这就是同志文化或是酷儿文化对我来讲有趣的地方，就是 它可以它就是很像嘉年华一样，很渲染、很美、很妖艳。可是它也可以有很多很近、带有创伤、很深层的一些故事。可是它又可以很恶心，就是
很狂烈，
很前卫、
很野。
很狂烈、很野。对，
对，
我觉得这一些东西都是他们就把这些东西做得很极致，我觉得这才是酷儿文化好玩的地方。那我就希望，我们台湾的艺文界可以继续往这个地方去发展。可是我所谓的发展，不是只是把这些元素放到台上，就是哦，我们这一部就要做很多性癖好的东西，我觉得不是这样，而是这个性癖好底蕴里面的那些更深层的东西，
嗯，
要把它带出来做。那
哦
我觉得加拿大也有一个同样的问题，like I find that a lot of Canadian specific Canadian queer arts is also in this very like where like alternative art or like these very like um very again pride-esque festival drag queens big colors kind of art. But what I love about seeing work in Berlin and New York as well is, again, the quiet parts, the darker parts, the nasty, the gritty, the hurt, the blood, the tears, the sweat. Like those things um, really, really inspire me. And I see that a lot in our queer culture, in our queer lives, but I don't see that as much in our queer art.
I think you addressed, some really good points because I also see that, and I share with you about the expression of, the level, the depths of it, right? Of representation. Like, I feel like I think this is a cultural thing, and that's the difference in terms of that. But I really love European films, like films made in France, for example, like Berlin and stuff like that. They're very unafraid to express and show you the rawness, right? I feel like the film was made to express more than, hey, should I make this film because I need to please the audience or I'm concerned about what the audience's reactions would be, right? Then that's also good for consideration, but then in that process, you might lose your true the depth of your representation and what is it that you're trying to convey, what stories you want to show, right? And in reality, in truth, like no matter what we're doing, life isn't always pretty, right? Life is raw. Life is beautiful. Life is loving, but life is can be very hurtful, right? Life can be very clean. It can also be very dirty and gruesome, right?
Yeah.
Or it can be very sophisticated and very professional and well put together, right? So life can be so many aspects of different things. But I definitely agree that yeah, if you were making a film, for example, in France or something, it's a different. You're gonna go all the way, and you're just and then that's why we're watching those films. While there's maybe not much dialogue, we're like, oh my God, did I just see that? But oh my God, I don't usually see that. But then wait a minute, but that could be, it happens, right? Okay, shit, excuse me. Like, it's kind of the realm of that. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
And like raw doesn't mean non-pretty too, right? I think
Exactly.
raw just means allowing some of the edges to show. Like I would say the opposite of raw is not so polished. Some things don't have to be that clean. Like there's a TV show I actually really like called Looking. It was about like gay lives of people in San Francisco and like the way they use the color and the way they portray everyone, it feels very real. Like it wasn't like overtly edited, saturated colors. It's like very everyday. And sometimes they even I think they use a little filter to make it a little bit more on like the yellowish side to bring in like a more raw aesthetic. Or some things like an old TV show called Queer as Folk was really good at capturing that. But also like I also don't mean it has to be so like losing of imagination, right? It can also be
Mhm.
so ridiculous, but go off into the deep ends, right? Like I
Yeah.
was so fortunate to be part of the film Joyride.
Mm.
And what I loved about it when I talk about the film or when I talk to I actually sent Adele, the director, a sort of email about it was like, it's so fascinating to see Asian women on cinema being so raw, being so unapologetic about their sexuality, and then but then they do it in a way that was so extreme, like watching like Asian women be able to allow themselves to just be, to be big, to do all these ridiculous things. Like that is us as well, right?
Yeah.
Similar to whether it's about Asianness or women or about queer people, like what I just want people to know is that we have possibilities, right? Like Asian women in Asian film don't always have to be about like family, honor, right? Like what I love about that about Joyride, and I mentioned when I had a chance to talk to people about it, was all these characters are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, but they're still great. Still have depth, and they're also still heroes, right? Like, I talked about the character I play, Xing Xing, a lot, and it's like a very flamboyant, like sort of like what people would expect from a sort of a more feminine presenting, queer coded character. But what I loved about it, it was that character wasn't just the comedic relief. It was not just the funny gay friend that shows up, right? The character was a hero. He was there to solve a problem. He was there to rescue people. And that what I loved about it, it's like heroic characters or heroes can look different.
Yeah.
They don't have to be macho, handsome, walking through like, this like very flamboyantly dressed, Asian man comes through and he like tries to save the day, right? And that's what fascinates me about the work. And I think that that's what I crave a lot more in when we're talking specifically about queer arts, is that where is that? Like, how do we find those layers? How do we like, yes, we have these really big flamboyant drag queens. We have these very big, like sassy-esque characters. But what about those characters that, for example, in Fire Island, which I also love, like these very soft, nuanced characters, like Bo and Yang's character it's very the stereotypical protagonist is very like gung-ho and I'm gonna do all this. He's very, reserved. He's very submissive. He has a lot of insecurities, but he still steps up. He still protects himself. He still goes for what he wants at the end and find love, right? And so I want those stories, right?
Yeah, I want those stories too. Yeah, because I think it's so important to touch on those little gaps. I love those little moments, right? And I like how you brought up the quiet queer, right? Because they don't always it's not just that one big group where you're flamboyantly expressing and showing that, hey, I'm visibly different. I think there's there's also the quiet group, right? I feel like there's almost a bit of a social pressure to showcase that, or to express because you decided to be. But at the end of the day, it's so important just to be who you are, be comfortable in your own skin, whatever it is that you identify or feel, aligned with. Um, I I also think that you'll actually really enjoy my book because it's simple, but it's talking about those gaps. And then just because certain parts may be raw, is the truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have problems handling the truth, but it's okay. Sit in that discomfort and then explore to come to, be comfortable with it, right? In those exploration. And that's when you get really connected with yourself and really honest, right? Because nothing is perfect, so that it can be imperfect, so that it can be perfect, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
in a weird way, that's how a lot of perfections work, right? You were talking about the film list, so I will be sharing that, after our talk. I will be sharing your social media link so people can, take a look at that as well. I did wanted to quickly touch on there was also another a queer film that I watched that was Taiwanese. It was on Netflix. It was called A Sun. And that one was really good because it showed exactly that. They weren't visibly, from the queer community identity, right? Kind of thing. You couldn't tell. In fact, one of the main characters, he gets married and has a son, right? Kind of thing, and has a wife, but then he decides to step away from that to go into his true alignment of identity, right? But I'm not going to ruin the whole story for people that are still haven't seen it because it's a great film, but it's very subtle and people love in so many different ways. And yeah, I think that's a great film to capture. I also have some shirts that I like, but I think just tonight in Vancouver, May 31st, Friday evening, there is a film that is showing at the theater. There's a cinematic. Um, I think, yeah,
Cinematic.
that, yeah, that's right. And I think it's 8:40. I think it's 8:45 p.m., but don't quote me. Do go to their website and check it out. It's called The Hole. It was a film made on film, shot in the 90s by the famous director, Taiwanese director. 他的名字叫做蔡明亮. So Tsai Ming Liang. And I've been wanting to see that film for some years now, but I've been looking around online and this is what happens, right? Usually when it's shot on film, it's an older film, it's really hard to find them. But anyways, it's showing. So I think it's worth seeing because it talks about going back. We were talking about the nostalgia of different parts of film, whether it's from music or expression of it, right? So in that film, I saw that clearly depicted in the quietness of the daily lives of all the little doings, and then the imagination of life in the musical aspect of it. So yeah, but anyways, do check that out. So I want to stop here and thank Johnny for joining us today at Her Stories Untold. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for your all your your journey, your words of wisdom, and I think everything that you've shared today with us today is not just for the queer community. I think it's for everybody, and there's something to really take away to be empowered and inspired in all the things that everyone is doing in their lives, and I think it's really beautiful. And then so please do share with us with your project I do and all the other new projects that's going to be coming out. I love to cross promote and amplify the arts together because that's my way of showing how I love cinema, my love letter to all the other artists, around the globe. It doesn't just have to be in film because I think there's everyone has a beauty, a talent, a skill to take away from, kind of things. So thank you, Johnny.
Well, I just want to add one more thing.
Oh yeah.
I this quote sort of came out of my mind when I was doing a quick interview
Yeah.
Q&A section for Joyride,
Yeah.
and people really often ask like, what would you say to people who want to create or make art and things like that? And I really believe that you just have to show up, show off, and show out. Because you don't know who is sitting on the other side, whether it's in the audience or on the other side of the screen or other side of the stage, that will resonate with what you're doing. So all you can do and all you really should do is to really allow yourself to shine and let yourself be seen. And then really, really encourage people to do that. Not in like a way of egotistical way, but really like I said with the character Xing Xing from Joyride, is heroes can look very different, and you
Mm.
might be someone's hero. So really allow yourself to shine.
Uh, yeah, I think that's beautiful because that's so true. Showing up, allowing yourself to be yourself, and then showing yourself through, projecting yourself out. So that's very powerful. And I think yeah, I love the part about the showing up part. And I think showing up, even if you're not from that community, showing up if you're different, you know, and then just showing up to be interested, to learn about it, right? Showing up so that you learn and take something away and you can share with other people. And then most importantly, to the, different groups that are receiving the showing ups, be open, be welcoming, be embracing, and come with, hey, I'm so glad that you decided to show up, even though you're different. Okay, we're going to be introducing you all these things, all these goodies, right? As opposed to like, oh, wait, that one, you're not really part of this community. Why are you here, right? No, people show up. Yeah, and that's how we learn and grow together, right? So, yeah, so thank you very much for sharing that very important point. And yeah, I wish I could probably talk to you forever and ever, and that's very sincere what I'm saying. And yeah, so I hope the audiences have enjoyed our talk today because it will be available on Facebook, and then we'll also be sure to YouTube and also on the podcast form. So yeah, there you go. Heart. I think, or I thought Zoom was gonna have that heart thing that usually show up. It's not working right now. Zoom. Okay.
No, that's okay. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of the weekend, and take care, and bye for now. Thank you.
Bye.
哎，谢谢。